question from Colin. If the stock hits its target before the 17th day, do you sell or resubmit for higher highs?
If it hits before the 17th day, depending on where the cycle is, if it's on the 8th or 9th day, you're going to want to, that's a decision-making point right there. So on the first day of the cycle, if I put a buy recommendation on UNG, which in the next 7 to 9 days, if you guys just mark down today, UNG, price $15, 7 to 9 days out, where does it peak? The peak potential for this particular stock right now is between $16 and $17. That's on the long side. The downside, I don't know because it's never been there. That's the problem I'm having with this particular stock. It's never traded below these levels. So you can't define something that doesn't exist. But look at it from that standpoint. And if it's peaking out between the 7th and 9th day, you're making a decision to lock it in. If it hits our target, it's achieved your original goal. If you want to try and squeeze out a little bit more money on it, then let it ride. But chances are it's going to peak out between the 7th and 9th day. If it fails to fail on the 9th to 11th day, then it's going to maintain that bullish pattern for a full 17 days, or that bearish pattern for a full 17 days. Then you've got to make a secondary decision.
Okay, here's a question from Eli. He asks, can today's high government intervention environment mislead the Pro-17 system?
Mike, I'll let you answer that first because I would like you to talk about, before I put my opinion on that, about a conference call we had just a couple weeks ago.
Sure. Basically, the way I see it is the Pro-17 system, well, the Pro-17 system doesn't care about fundamentals, doesn't care about what's going on, what the chatter going on in the market space, and that's what we feel makes the Pro-17 system so unique and so valuable to a trader. So you don't get caught up in the hype, or you don't get caught up in today's news. I mean, if you try to trade the news, you're gonna catch everything after it's already happened. Stock announces earnings, shoots up, you buy it. Chances are you bought it at the peak, and conversely, you might be if you're trying to short something, it could go the other way against you as well. That is what's so great about the Pro-17 system, is it's not looking at anything else but the technical analysis that is proprietary to the Pro-17 system. That said, there are some of the examples we gave earlier today, for instance, shearing plow, where that was a fundamental event that happened there. There was a buyout. The Pro-17 system is actually able, from its analysis, actually able to catch those extraordinary events like that. Same thing with RIM. So we feel it's a benefit the way it's set up.
All right, so I'll add to that. A couple weeks ago, when Geithner came out and he made his announcement, and it affected the market. I called Mike and I said, get an immediate conference call together, because it created a lot of anxiety in the market. And in the media component of that, they were all over the place. They didn't know what to make of it. They didn't know what to do with it. So we called the conference call, and I addressed it. This is a false reading. It may affect our forecast for 2 to 3 days, but eventually the behavior will overtake regardless of what Geithner said. And it did exactly what we discussed on the conference call. And because of that, because you rely on a system versus an event like a Geithner event, or Obama comes out and says something crazy that nobody gets and it affects the market one way or another, this is going to smooth out that emotional decision-making factor. And the way I define that, and I've told Mike this and everybody else many, many times, I assume one thing when I'm making a forecast, that there is somebody a lot smarter with me with a lot more money that's affecting that behavior and generating these ideas. So when we do catch a buyout, we're catching behavior that took place 5 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, that nobody knew about. There was no news on it. It's the behavior of what was taking place in the intelligent part of that, in the intelligence part of that stock, that we're catching today. And a lot of that is tied, if you've ever served in investment banking or as a broker, or you really paid close attention to one stock for a very long period of time, you're going to see, when a company surprises on the earnings, it catches people off guard one way or another. A lot of times, it'll peak out and tank right after that. Well, why did that happen? Why did it peak out? Because the people who knew it was going to do that were in there 4 or 5 weeks ago. Those are the guys smarter than you with a lot more money. So I would rather emulate the intelligent behavior than emulate the mass behavior. So this helps target a better audience. And whatever they're doing, we want to imitate them, but we don't have to buy it for 5 to 7 weeks out. That's where Pro 17 generates the buy signal.
Todd, as an example for government intervention, the government's been very involved with TARP funds and so forth with banks. What have you seen? Has that affected the Pro 17 system at all? What the government's been doing with banks, for instance?
I think in general it's eliminated the fear that was associated with banks and the oversold condition. If you guys are subscribers to Bank America, or you trade Bank America, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, the XLF, any of the bank stocks, you're going to see the analysis in Pro 17, a progression, and we're slightly ahead of the curve on every single part of that cycle where the market's going to go. We called the bottoms in all these stocks. We also have called every break point going up and every break point going down from a failure standpoint. So all this does is tell you what behavior is doing, and the fact of the matter is the herd is not going to change for the people who have the intelligence. I'm not sure that particular analogy makes sense, but what I am seeing is that fear has left the market and banks. Now the general population is looking for real opportunities in the market, and they're acting on it. While they may only act with a portion of their portfolio or buying capacity, they're acting in a different behavior than what they were doing in October, November, and December. So from a behavioral standpoint, fear is being replaced by greed. Greed is being exhibited right now in the form of dipping your toe in the water. This is very cautionary trading, but it's not just isolated to 10% of the market. The majority of the market is dipping their toe in. And that's the first signs that a market's transitioning from a bear market to a bull market.
Okay, here's a question from Dennis. He asks, do the recommendations also have suggested stops to limit losses, or do we need to have Pro 17 review the stock again?
I don't put in stop losses. At least I don't use that particular language. Myself, I don't use stop losses for this purpose under Pro 17. The market knows what those stop losses are at. The market maker knows it. The specialist knows it. They see the orders on the books. They have the ability to take a stock down, snatch your stock, and then run it back up. And if you've been trading with stop losses for a very long period of time, you've probably seen it many times in your life where you're sitting on a $10 stock and you believe it's going to 12, and it dips down to $8.50 or $9.50 intraday. They take your loss out, and then you'll see the stock in a couple more days at $12. Well, this will eliminate or help reduce the amount of times that ever happens to you. So I rely more on Pro 17 to tell me if it's actually going to tank or is it going to break out, because there's always a final lean in a stock, and there's always there's a lean to the upside and a lean to the downside, and those final things are your last gasp for making that last decision. Pro 17 is going to find that more often than not, and if you eliminate your stop losses, you won't get snatched away when you shouldn't.
Also, on the Pro 17 forecast, let's say we've got a positive bias on the forecast. More often than not, we're also going to list, however, what the downside risk is in this current 17-day cycle. So we might say, hey, we've got a target. If the thing's at 8, we think it's going to go to 10 to 12. But we'll say, hey, there's also some downside